The pre-dawn darkness of St. Mary's Orphanage shattered like glass under the thunder of hoofbeats and the harsh bark of men's voices. Emma Sullivan jolted awake in her narrow cot, her heart hammering against her ribs as she instinctively clutched the small fox-shaped pendant that hung from a leather cord around her neck, the only possession she'd carried when she'd arrived at the orphanage 5 years ago, remembering nothing of her life before age 10. As boots stomped through the corridor outside her dormitory, Emma's mind raced back to just hours earlier when Father McKenna had sat beside her bed during his evening rounds. The gentle Irish priest had noticed her restlessness, the way she'd been clutching her pendant and muttering words in a language she didn't recognize during her sleep. His weathered hands had covered hers with infinite tenderness as he spoke the words that now echoed with terrifying significance. "Child," he'd whispered. "That pendant of yours, it's more than just silver and craftsmanship. It holds the truth about who you are, where you come from. I've asked a merchant friend named Samuel to help find your real family. They're looking for you, Emma. Promise me, no matter what happens, you'll keep that pendant close. Your memories will return when you're strong enough to bear them." Emma's throat tightened with grief as she remembered how he'd told her stories during her first terrifying nights at the orphanage, tales of brave children who found their way home against impossible odds. Father McKenna had been the only person who'd shown her unconditional love when she'd arrived confused and frightened, unable to remember her past, but haunted by dreams in a language she couldn't identify. The move faster. Round up the older girls. The voice belonged to Jake the Scorpion Martinez, a name whispered in fear across the Arizona territory. His spurs jangled as he strode through the dormitory, his men following like hungry wolves. Emma rolled under her bed, pressing her face against the cold wooden floor. Through the gaps between floorboards, she could see boots moving through the hallway below, and her stomach lurched as she caught fragments of conversation that made no sense. "Oh, boss said the girl with the fox pendant is worth a fortune," one raider muttered. "Something about Apache royalty in a silver mine." "Just find her and shut up," came the reply. "Blackwood's been planning this raid for months specifically to get her." Emma's breath caught. Who was Blackwood? And why would anyone think she was Apache royalty? She'd been found wandering near Fort Apache 5 years ago, speaking broken English mixed with words in an unknown language. The fort's doctor had diagnosed severe memory loss from trauma, but no one had ever suggested she might be connected to Apache nobility. The sound of splintering wood echoed from the chapel, followed by Father McKenna's voice, desperate and pleading. "Please, these are innocent children. They've done nothing to deserve this." Emma's heart broke as she heard genuine terror in the priest's voice. This was the man who'd tucked her in every night for 5 years, who'd patiently taught her to read English while she struggled with fragments of memories in another language, who'd never lost faith that she would find her way home. The shotgun blast that followed made Emma's ears ring and her vision blur with tears. She bit her lip to keep from screaming as she heard Father McKenna's body hit the floor with a sickening thud, and with it the death of the only safety she'd known. "Emma." The priest's voice was barely a whisper now, blood frothing at his lips. Somehow he'd managed to crawl to the dormitory entrance, his dying eyes desperately seeking hers in the darkness under the bed. "Remember? Samuel knows the truth about your family. 2 brothers. Searching for you. Don't let them break your spirit." Heavy boots approached her hiding spot before she could ask what he meant. A bandit kicked the bed aside, exposing her, and grabbed her arm with rough hands. His scarred face split into a grin when he saw her pendant glinting in the lamplight. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying the hint of a Mexican accent. "Boss," he called out. "She's got the fox necklace just like the old priest described." Martinez turned from where he'd been supervising the roundup of other girls, his cold eyes studying Emma with an intensity that made her skin crawl. He was perhaps 40, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent under the desert sun. But his clothes were expensive, and his weapons were of the finest quality. "So you're the famous little fox," he said, reaching out to touch her pendant. Emma jerked away, but his grip was iron strong. "Course you don't remember me, Nina. But I remember you. 5 years ago, you were just a terrified little girl screaming in Apache while soldiers dragged you away from your burning village." Emma's mind reeled. Martinez had been there when she was captured. "That's impossible. I don't remember any village." "Don't you?" Martinez's smile was cruel. "Tell me, girl, what do you dream about? A woman singing in a language you don't understand? 2 boys calling out a name that ain't Emma?" His eyes glittered with malicious knowledge. "That's because Emma Sullivan isn't your real name. You're Little Fox, daughter of Chief Running Bear, and you're worth more than all the silver in Arizona." Before Emma could respond, Martinez nodded to his men. "Load her with the others, but be careful. Mr. Blackwood's been very specific about keeping this one undamaged. She's the key to everything he's been planning." As rough hands bound her wrists, Emma caught a glimpse of something that made her blood run cold. Carved into Martinez's gun handle was a symbol that looked exactly like the pattern on her pendant, a fox surrounded by intricate Apache designs that seemed to pulse with meaning just beyond her conscious grasp. Oh, who is Blackwood?" she demanded as they dragged her toward the door. "Your destiny," Martinez replied. "A man who's been waiting 5 years for this moment. He's the one who arranged for your village to be attacked, and he's the one who's going to make sure you never remember enough to cause him trouble." Emma's last glimpse of St. Mary's Orphanage was of flames consuming the chapel, where Father McKenna had taught her to pray. And somewhere in the distance, she could swear she heard the sound of war cries carried on the desert wind voices, calling in that same unknown language that haunted her dreams. As the raiders loaded her into a wagon with 6 other terrified girls, Emma clutched her pendant tighter and whispered a prayer in English. But the words that came out were in that other language. And for the first time in 5 years, they felt like they came from somewhere deeper than memory, from a place in her soul that trauma couldn't touch. The journey to Tombstone was a 3-week nightmare of dust, heat, and fear. Emma was kept separate from the other girls, treated with a mixture of rough handling and careful preservation that made it clear she was being saved for something specific. During the long days in the wagon, she found herself studying the landscape with growing familiarity, as if her body remembered paths her mind had forgotten. At night, her dreams became more vivid. She saw herself as a child running through a village of cone-shaped dwellings, being chased by 2 laughing boys who called her Little Fox in that unknown language. There was a woman with gentle hands who sang to her in the evenings, and a man with kind eyes who taught her to read animal tracks in the sand. But when she woke, the images scattered like smoke, leaving only the ache of something precious lost. When they finally reached Lucille's palace on the outskirts of Tombstone, Emma was immediately marked as different. Madame Lucille, a woman whose painted face couldn't hide the calculating hardness in her eyes, personally oversaw the tattoo that was inked onto Emma's shoulder, a fox design that matched her pendant exactly down to the intricate Apache patterns that surrounded it. The discerning clientele appreciate a girl with mystery. Lucille explained, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "And you, my dear, are quite the mystery. Mr. Blackwood was very specific about your preparation. You're to be kept pristine until he arrives." Emma was assigned to kitchen work, though she overheard enough conversations to understand that Lucille was waiting for specific orders regarding her future. The palace catered to wealthy ranchers and businessmen, and Emma noticed that several of the girls whispered fearfully about clients who preferred exotic women, Apache Mexican or mixed-blood girls who reminded them of conquests over savages. "You're different from the others," observed Sophia, a 16-year-old Mexican girl who'd been sold by her own uncle to pay gambling debts. Unlike Emma, Sophia remembered everything about her past and sometimes Emma envied her that painful clarity. "How so?" Emma asked as Sophia helped her with the evening meal preparation. "You move like you know things you don't remember. When you arrange the dishes, you make patterns that look like—" Sophia paused, studying Emma's unconscious arrangement of plates. "Like the designs the Apache traders wear. And sometimes you count in a language that ain't English or Spanish." Emma looked down at the plates she'd unconsciously arranged in a spiral pattern around a central bowl. The sight triggered a flash of memory, a woman's hands teaching her to serve food in a way that honored the four directions, though she couldn't remember who the woman was or why it mattered. "I dream about a woman who sings," Emma admitted. "And two boys who call me by a name that isn't Emma. But when I wake up, I can't remember the name or the song." "Maybe you ain't supposed to remember yet," Sophia said gently. "Maybe your mind is protecting you from something too painful to bear." 50 miles north, in the Dragoon Mountains, two Apache warriors sat around a small fire, studying a letter that had arrived via their network of sympathetic traders. The message was brief but specific, written in the careful hand of Samuel Yazzie, a Navajo merchant who'd been working with Father McKenna to track down missing Apache children. "The girl you seek works at Lucille's palace in Tombstone." Ayanna read aloud to his younger brother. "Auburn hair, green eyes, about 15 years old. She wears a fox pendant and speaks Apache in her sleep. She calls herself Emma Sullivan, but her body remembers Apache ways, how she moves, how she serves food, how she reads the sky for weather. The priest who protected her is dead, killed defending her from the men who took her. You must act quickly. Her purchaser arrives within days." Nalnish, 18 and quick-tempered, threw a stick into the fire with unnecessary force. "How do we know this Samuel isn't leading us into a trap? We've followed a dozen false leads. This one is different." Ayanna's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Samuel worked with Father McKenna for 2 years, sending information back and forth. The priest knew who our sister was. From the beginning, he was protecting her, until we could find her safely. Little Fox, their sister who'd vanished at age 10 during Captain Morrison's cavalry raid on their village. The raid that had killed their parents and scattered their people to the winds. For 5 years they'd followed every lead, searched every settlement, tracked every rumor about a young Apache girl with memory loss. Their sister had been more than family. She'd been their father's chosen heir, trained from childhood in the old ways and the new, destined to bridge the gap between their people and the white world. Chief Running Bear had possessed an almost prophetic understanding of his daughter's importance, often saying she would grow up to lead their people through the dark times ahead. Father's journal, Ayanna said, pulling out a leather-bound book they'd saved from their childhood home. "Remember what he wrote about Little Fox. She will lead our people with wisdom, but first she must walk in both worlds to understand them." Nalnish studied the journal entry written in their father's careful hand. "You think her memory loss was part of some greater plan? I think Father McKenna understood more than he told anyone. His letters to Samuel suggest he deliberately kept her memories suppressed until she was strong enough to reclaim them without being destroyed by the trauma." The brothers had changed dramatically in the 5 years since losing their sister. Ayanna had become strategic and patient, learning to move unseen through white settlements and gather intelligence. Nalnish had grown fierce and impulsive, his grief transforming into a burning need for action. Both carried the guilt of not being able to protect their little sister when the soldiers came. "We leave at dawn," Ayanna decided. "But we must be careful. If this is Little Fox, she may not recognize us. We cannot terrify her further." As they prepared for the journey to Tombstone, neither brother noticed the figure watching from the rocks above their camp. Captain Morrison had been tracking them for weeks, following leads provided by his network of informants and Apache scouts forced to work for the cavalry. He'd heard the rumors about Chief Running Bear's daughter, and if she was really alive, she represented the key to breaking Apache resistance once and for all. Back at the palace, Emma lay awake, listening to the desert wind, her mind churning with fragments of returning memory. The sensation was like trying to grasp smoke. The harder she reached for the memories, the more they slipped away. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between sleeping and waking, she could almost hear that woman's voice singing, almost see the faces of the boys who'd called her by another name. Earlier that evening, she'd had another episode that left her shaken. While serving dinner to a group of ranchers, she'd overheard one of them mention Captain Morrison's name in connection with Apache troubles. The name had hit her like a physical blow, triggering a cascade of fragmented images, smoke, screaming the sound of hoofbeats, and over it all, a man's voice laughing as buildings burned. "Emma." Sophia's voice broke through her reverie. "You look like you've seen a ghost?" Emma touched her pendant, feeling its familiar warmth. "Maybe I have. Or maybe I'm starting to remember why I should be afraid." She didn't know it yet. But her brothers were already riding toward Tombstone, following the trail that would lead them to the most dangerous confrontation of their lives. And somewhere in the darkness, other forces were moving, forces that had been waiting 5 years for this moment, when the Apache chief's daughter would finally be within reach of the man who'd orchestrated her family's destruction. The morning sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson when Marcus Blackwood arrived at Lucille's palace. Emma watched from the kitchen window as his carriage pulled up, drawn by 4 magnificent black horses that spoke of wealth and power. The man who emerged was perhaps 50, with silver hair, pale blue eyes, and the kind of expensive clothes that cost more than most people earned in a year. But it was his bearing that made Emma's skin crawl. The way he moved with absolute confidence, as if he owned everything he surveyed, including the people within it. When he turned toward the building, Emma caught a glimpse of his profile, and something deep in her mind stirred with recognition and fear. "Emma, get out here." Lucille's voice cut through the morning air like a whip. "Mr. Blackwood has traveled a long way to meet you specifically." Emma's stomach dropped. She'd heard whispers about Blackwood over the past weeks, one of the territory's most powerful cattle barons, a man who'd built his empire through methods that didn't bear close examination. Men like him didn't visit places like this for casual conversation. She smoothed her simple dress and walked into the main parlor, her bare feet silent on the worn wooden floors. Blackwood stood with his back to her, studying a painting of a frontier landscape. But Emma could feel his attention like a physical weight pressing down on her. "So," he said without turning around, his voice cultured and precise, "this is the famous Emma Sullivan." When he finally faced her, his pale eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. "Though I suspect that's not your real name, is it?" Emma's ability to read people, a skill her father had taught her that survived even her memory loss, immediately identified Blackwood as dangerous. His smile was too controlled, his posture too calculated. This was a man who viewed other people as chess pieces to be moved around a board. "It's the only name I remember," Emma replied, keeping her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "Ah, yes, the convenient amnesia." Blackwood stepped closer, and Emma caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something else, the metallic tang of fear and old blood. "Tell me, my dear, what do you remember of the night you were found?" "I remember waking up in a cavalry camp. I was cold, scared, and speaking words in a language I didn't understand." "And the soldiers who found you, do you remember their faces?" Emma hesitated. Her father had taught her to trust her instincts about people, and every instinct screamed that Blackwood's questions weren't idle curiosity. "Some of them. There was a captain who kept staring at me like he knew me. The other soldiers called him Morrison." Blackwood's smile widened, and Emma caught a flash of something that might have been satisfaction. "Captain Morrison. Yes, he's an old business associate of mine, quite skilled at acquiring valuable assets under the guise of military necessity." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, my dear child, that your capture 5 years ago wasn't the random act of war you've been told it was. It was a carefully orchestrated business transaction. Blackwood gestured to one of his men who stepped forward with rope. And now it's time to complete that transaction. Emma's mind reeled as puzzle pieces began clicking into place. You're saying the cavalry attack was planned, that Morrison was working for you? Morrison has always been practical. Promise him a promotion for recovering stolen cavalry horses, and he'll attack whoever I point him toward. Blackwood's tone was conversational, as if discussing the weather. Your father's village was simply in the way of something I wanted. What could you possibly want badly enough to murder innocent people? Emma's voice rose with anger and horror. Power, my dear. Raw, undiluted power. Blackwood's eyes glittered with obsession. Your father's people had discovered one of the richest silver deposits in the territory. But more than that, they had you. Do you know what you are, Emma Sullivan? You're the daughter of Chief Running Bear, one of the most respected Apache leaders in the Southwest. In Apache culture, the chief's daughter isn't just royalty, she's a living symbol of the tribe's spiritual power. Emma felt the world tilting around her. You're lying. Am I then? Explain this. Blackwood reached out and touched her pendant before she could pull away. This isn't just jewelry, child. It's a sacred fox symbol passed down through generations of Apache chiefs. Only the daughter of Running Bear could wear it without bringing a curse upon herself. Before Emma could respond, the sound of gunfire erupted outside. Blackwood's men drew their weapons, but the attack was too swift and coordinated. Apache warriors burst through the windows and doors, moving with the fluid precision of men who'd spent years perfecting the art of war. Little Fox. One of the warriors shouted the words in Apache, his voice carrying across the room like a prayer answered after years of silence. Emma's head exploded with pain as memories crashed over her like a flash flood. She saw herself as a child running through a village of cone-shaped dwellings, being chased by two laughing boys who called her by that same name. She saw a man with kind eyes teaching her to track animals by reading the subtle signs in disturbed earth. She saw a woman with a beautiful voice singing her to sleep while stars wheeled overhead. No. Ayana Nalnish. The names tore from her throat before she even realized she was speaking. She didn't fully understand the memories yet, but her body reacted instinctively, her hands working frantically at the ropes that had bound her. The taller warrior, Ayana, fought with controlled fury, his movements precise and economical. The younger one, Nalnish, was a whirlwind of rage, his war cry echoing off the walls as he cut down Blackwood's men with deadly efficiency. In the chaos, Emma's bonds came loose, and she rolled away from Blackwood just as one of his men's bullets splintered the wooden post where she'd been tied. The girl. Blackwood screamed, his composure finally cracking. Don't let her escape. But Emma was already moving her feet, finding purchase on terrain that suddenly felt familiar. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of battle gunshots, war cries, the clash of steel on steel. She reached the back door of the palace, turned to see Blackwood, mounting his horse, his surviving men rallying around him. This isn't over, little fox. He shouted, his face twisted with rage and frustrated obsession. I've invested too much time and money in you to let you slip away now. You can't run from what you are. As Blackwood and his men rode away, Emma found herself face to face with the two Apache warriors who called her by her childhood name. Up close, she could see the family resemblance that had been hidden by war paint. The same green eyes as her own, the same stubborn set to the jaw that she saw in her own reflection. Little Fox. The taller one said softly, switching to accented English. I am Ayana, your brother. This is Nalnish, also your brother. We have been searching for you for 5 years. Emma stared at them, her mind struggling to process the flood of returning memories. I remember you. Not clearly, but I remember feeling safe with you. The memories will return. Nalnish said, his voice thick with emotion. Our grandmother has ways to help heal the wounds in your mind. But first, we must get you to safety. As they prepared to leave Tombstone, Emma felt as though she was awakening from a 5-year nightmare. The frightened orphan who'd worked in the palace was still part of her. But underneath, something stronger was stirring, something that remembered how to be Apache, how to survive in the desert, how to read the intentions of enemies and allies alike. The journey to the Apache stronghold took 2 days of careful travel through hidden canyons and forgotten trails. Emma rode behind Nalnish on his horse, and with each mile more memories returned in fragments. She began to recognize landmarks, distinctive rock formations her father had taught her to use for navigation, hidden springs, where her people had camped for generations, the subtle signs that marked Apache territory. You're remembering, Ayanna observed during one of their rest stops, watching Emma study the terrain with growing familiarity. It's like waking up from a dream, Emma admitted, unconsciously arranging their supplies in patterns that honored the 4 directions. The memories are there, but they're mixed up with everything that happened after. Sometimes I feel like I'm 2 different people. You are 2 different people, Nalnish said gently. You're Emma Sullivan, who survived 5 years in the White World, and you're Little Fox, daughter of Chief Running Bear. Both are real, both are you. The question is, which one will you choose to be? On the 2nd day, they encountered other survivors from Blackwood's network of cruelty. Sophia had managed to escape during the chaos at the palace, along with 3 other girls who'd been held in similar circumstances. They were hiding in a natural shelter formed by towering red rocks, their faces showing the strain of their ordeal. Emma. Sophia called out softly when she saw them approach. Thank God you're alive. I thought Blackwood's men had caught you. Emma embraced her friend, relief flooding through her. Are you hurt? How did you escape? During the fighting, some of us managed to slip away. But Emma, there are others Apache women that Blackwood has been holding at his ranch for years. They're still trapped there. Sophia's voice was grim. I heard the guards talking. He's been collecting Apache women like trophies. He believes that breaking them will give him power over your people. Emma's recovered memories supplied a surge of righteous anger. If Blackwood had been systematically capturing Apache women, then her own ordeal was part of a much larger pattern of cruelty designed to destroy the spiritual heart of her people. How many? Emma asked, her voice taking on the authority of someone born to command. At least a dozen, maybe more. They're kept in a compound about a day's ride from here. But Emma, the place is like a fortress. Guards, walls, guns. Sophia's voice trailed off as she saw the determination in Emma's eyes. We have to help them, Emma said firmly. Little Fox, it's too dangerous. Ayanna protested. Blackwood's ranch is heavily guarded, and Morrison's cavalry is still hunting for you. Then we'll have to be smarter than both of them. Emma's voice carried a new authority, as if her recovered memories had awakened something deeper than personal history. I know things about Blackwood that he doesn't realize I know. And I remember Father's teachings about reading an enemy's character, finding their weaknesses. As they continued toward the Apache stronghold, Emma found herself slipping naturally into a leadership role. Her recovered memories included not just her childhood, but years of training in diplomacy strategy and the delicate art of reading people's true intention, skills that had somehow survived even her trauma-induced amnesia. The stronghold was hidden in a maze of canyons that had served as a refuge for Apache families for generations. When they arrived, Emma was overwhelmed by the familiar sights and sounds, the cone-shaped dwellings, the horses grazing in hidden meadows, the smoke rising from cooking fires, the sound of children laughing in the language of her birth. Home, she whispered, not realizing she'd spoken in Apache. An elderly woman emerged from the largest dwelling, her weathered face lighting up with joy and disbelief. Little Fox, she breathed, reaching out to touch Emma's cheek with trembling fingers. My granddaughter. I knew you would come home. Emma looked into the woman's eyes and felt something profound shift inside her chest. She didn't remember this woman clearly, but she felt safer than she had in 5 years. Grandmother, yes, child. I am Willow, your father's mother. I have been waiting for you, keeping the old ways alive until you could return to claim your birthright. That night, the stronghold held a feast to celebrate Emma's return. She sat beside Grandmother Willow, listening to stories of her childhood, trying to reconcile the tales with her gradually returning memories. But as the evening progressed, something remarkable began to happen. When the tribal storyteller began reciting the history of their people, Emma found herself mouthing the words along with him. When the musicians started playing traditional songs, her feet began tapping out rhythms she didn't consciously remember learning. And when a group of children asked her to tell them a story, she found herself speaking in fluent Apache, relating a tale about a clever fox who outwitted enemies by understanding their deepest fears. I don't understand, she said to Grandmother Willow after the feast. How can I know these things when I don't remember learning them? Memory lives in your heart, child, not just in your mind. Willow replied, her ancient eyes kind but serious. The trauma that stole your memories couldn't touch the deeper parts of you, the parts that make you Apache. Your spirit remembered even when your mind forgot. But what if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't be the leader Father wanted me to be? Your father saw something in you that even you don't see yet. He wrote in his journal that you would lead our people through the dark times, but first you would have to walk in both worlds to understand them. Willow's voice carried the weight of prophecy. You have done that, child. Now you must decide what to do with that wisdom. As Emma prepared for sleep in her grandmother's dwelling, she felt the weight of recovered identity settling on her shoulders. She was no longer just the confused orphan who'd worked at the palace. But she wasn't quite the Apache princess she'd been born to be either. She was something new, a bridge between worlds shaped by trauma, but not broken by it. The next morning brought urgent news. A young Apache scout arrived with word that Morrison's cavalry was closing in on their position, guided by Apache trackers who'd been forced to work for the soldiers through threats against their families. We have perhaps 6 hours before they find us, the scout reported. The colonel has 50 men, and he's been asking about the chief's daughter specifically. Emma felt her blood run cold. Morrison wasn't just hunting her randomly, he was working with Blackwood to complete whatever plan they'd started 5 years ago. We need to evacuate, Ayanna said immediately. Get the women and children to the deeper canyons. No, Emma said firmly, her voice carrying new authority. Running will only delay the inevitable. Morrison won't stop hunting us, and Blackwood won't stop collecting Apache women. We need to end this now. How? Melnish asked. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Emma's recovered memories supplied tactical knowledge her father had taught her, combined with insights into human nature she'd gained from her years in the white world. We use their obsession against them. Blackwood wants me alive, because he thinks possessing me will give him power over all Apache. Morrison wants me dead because he knows I can expose his crimes. We make them fight each other. The plan Emma proposed was audacious in its simplicity. She would allow herself to be captured, but on her terms, with her people positioned to exploit the chaos that would follow. More importantly, she would use her ability to read people, the skill her father had taught her, that had somehow survived her amnesia, to turn her enemies against each other. It's too dangerous, Ayanna protested. You don't know what they might do to you. I know exactly what they'll do. Blackwood will take me to his ranch where he's holding the other Apache women. He'll try to break my spirit through psychological torture because he believes that's the key to controlling our people. Emma's voice was calm but determined. What he doesn't know is that I've already been broken and made whole again. I'm not the same frightened girl he captured 5 years ago. This is suicide, little fox, Nalnish said bluntly. Let us attack the ranch with warriors. We'll rescue the women by force. And how many of our people will die in the process? How many of the captive women will be killed before we can reach them? Emma shook her head. No, this has to be done carefully. Blackwood's strength is his control over the situation. We need to make him react instead of act. Emma's plan required precise timing and coordination. She would allow Morrison scouts to find her, but in a location where her brothers could track her movements. Meanwhile, other Apache warriors would position themselves around Blackwood's ranch, ready to strike when the moment was right. There's something else, she told Grandmother Willow privately. The memories that have been returning, they include more than just my childhood. I remember things Father taught me about reading people's true intentions, about finding their weaknesses and using them. If we can survive this confrontation, I can help our people not just preserve their culture, but thrive in the changing world. Willow nodded slowly. Your father had visions about you, child. He said you would be the one to lead our people through the dark times ahead, with wisdom earned through suffering. I think he was right. 2 days later, Emma sat by a stream in a canyon she knew Morrison's scouts would find making herself visible while appearing to be alone. She'd painted her face with traditional Apache designs, both as a symbol of her reclaimed identity and as a message to her enemies. Little Fox had remembered who she was. The scouts found her within hours, as she'd known they would. But instead of running, she stood calmly and raised her hands in apparent surrender. Tell Morrison I'm ready to make a deal, she said to the lead scout, a young Apache man, whose eyes showed the pain of forced cooperation. Tell him Little Fox wants to discuss terms. The scout's eyes widened with recognition and something like hope. Little Fox, you're really the chief's daughter. I'm really Chief Running Bear's daughter, and I'm ready to end this war. Emma's voice carried quiet authority. But I'll only negotiate with Morrison and Blackwood together. If they want me, they'll have to meet my conditions. The message was delivered, and within hours Morrison arrived with a small contingent of soldiers. The captain was older than Emma's fragmentary memories suggested, his face weathered by years of desert warfare. But his eyes held the same cruel intelligence she'd glimpsed in her recovered memories of that terrible night. So, he said, dismounting from his horse with theatrical slowness, the famous Little Fox has finally decided to surrender. I have to admit, I'm impressed. Most Apache would rather die than give up. Emma's ability to read people immediately identified the captain's weakness, his need to appear superior, to dominate every conversation. Most Apache haven't had the advantages I've had. 5 years in the white world taught me that sometimes the best way to win is to appear to lose. Morrison's laugh was harsh and forced. Clever words, but you're still my prisoner. Mr. Blackwood is going to be very pleased. Is he? Because I notice he's not here. Does he not trust you to handle one Apache girl? Emma's tone was carefully calculated to probe the relationship between the two men. The taunt hit home. Morrison's face darkened, and Emma realized she'd identified a crucial weakness in their partnership. Morrison resented being Blackwood's subordinate, and that resentment could be exploited. Auntie Blackwood will see you when he's ready, Morrison said coldly. Right now, you're going to tell me where the rest of your people are hiding. I'll tell Blackwood everything he wants to know, Emma replied calmly. But only Blackwood. I don't negotiate with hired help. The insult was calculated to drive a wedge between Morrison and his employer. Emma could see the anger building in the captain's eyes, and she knew her strategy was working. The ride to Blackwood's ranch took most of the day, with Emma riding under guard, while Morrison's men kept careful watch for Apache ambushes. But Emma had planned for this. Her brothers would be tracking the column from a safe distance, waiting for the right moment to strike. The ranch itself was even more impressive than Emma had imagined. It sprawled across a fertile valley with the main house built like a fortress and outbuildings that could shelter hundreds of people. But what caught Emma's attention were the guard towers and barred windows, clear signs that this was as much a prison as a ranch. Blackwood emerged from the main house as Morrison's column rode into the courtyard, his pale eyes fixed on Emma with the same predatory hunger she remembered from the palace. He was dressed in expensive clothes, but Emma's enhanced ability to read people caught the subtle signs of a man under pressure, the slight tremor in his hands, the tightness around his eyes. "Welcome home, little fox," he said, his voice cultured but strained. "I trust your brief taste of freedom was educational." Emma's enhanced ability to read people, inherited from her father's teachings, immediately assessed Blackwood's psychological state. The man was obsessed, but also desperate. His empire was built on a foundation of lies and violence that required constant maintenance. "It was enlightening," Emma replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "I learned a lot about the kind of man who would murder innocent people for power." "Power," Blackwood laughed, but Emma caught the forced quality in it. "My dear child, you still don't understand. What I've built here isn't just about silver or land. It's about control over your people, control over this territory, control over the future itself." He gestured to the buildings around them, and Emma's sharp eyes caught details that revealed the true nature of his operation. Guard towers positioned to overlook barred windows, armed men stationed at strategic points, and the subtle signs of a compound designed to hold people against their will. "Do you see what I've accomplished?" Blackwood continued. "This isn't just a ranch, it's the foundation of an empire. And you, little fox, are going to help me complete it." Emma's recovered memories supplied tactical information about the compound's layout, but her enhanced people-reading skills also noted something crucial: the tension between Blackwood and Morrison. The two men stood apart, their body language suggesting a partnership under strain. "You're more delusional than I thought," she said deliberately, choosing words that would increase that tension. "Did you really think capturing me would make the Apache surrender?" "Not surrender, no. But with you as my guest, I can negotiate from a position of strength." Blackwood's voice carried the fervor of a true believer. "Apache culture places great value on the safety of women and children. Your people will do whatever I ask to ensure your well-being." Emma smiled, and something in her expression made both men take a step back. "You've made one crucial error in your calculations, Mr. Blackwood. And what's that? You assumed I came here as your prisoner. But I came here as your judgment." Emma's plan sprang into motion with the precision of a chess master's final gambit. Her brothers and their warriors had spent hours positioning themselves around the compound, and at her signal, a traditional Apache war cry that echoed off the canyon walls they struck with devastating coordination. But this wasn't a frontal assault. Emma had learned from her father's teachings about psychological warfare, and she'd identified the key weakness in her enemy's partnership. Instead of attacking immediately, she used the chaos to plant seeds of doubt and suspicion. "They Morrison," she called out as gunfire erupted around them. "Did you know Blackwood has been keeping records of all your crimes, every illegal order, every murdered civilian, every bribe you've taken? It's all documented in his private study." The lie was calculated to exploit Morrison's paranoia about being used as a scapegoat. Emma had seen the files in Blackwood's study during her brief glimpse of the compound, and her ability to read people told her that Morrison was already suspicious of his partner's loyalty. "Now that's impossible," Morrison snarled, but his eyes were on Blackwood, now searching for signs of betrayal. "Is it?" Emma continued, backing away from both men as Apache warriors engaged the ranch's defenders. "He's been planning to blame everything on you from the beginning. The rogue military officer who went too far, while he emerges as the innocent businessman who was deceived." The psychological warfare was working. Morrison's face was growing darker by the moment, and his grip on his weapon was shifting from Emma to Blackwood. "She's lying, trying to divide us," Blackwood said, but his voice lacked conviction. The stress of the attack was breaking down his carefully maintained facade. Emma pressed her advantage. "Then why does he keep a loaded pistol in his desk drawer specifically for dealing with unreliable partners? Why has he been quietly liquidating assets and preparing to flee the territory?" The seeds of doubt she'd planted were taking root. Morrison's military training made him naturally suspicious of being abandoned by superiors, and Emma's carefully chosen words played directly into those fears. "You son of a bitch." Morrison growled, his weapon now trained on Blackwood. "You've been planning to sacrifice me all along." "Don't be ridiculous," Blackwood replied, but his own gun was moving toward Morrison. "We're partners in this." "Partners?" Morrison's voice was deadly quiet. "I've been doing all the dirty work while you've been sitting in your comfortable ranch house counting profits. And now you want to make me the scapegoat when it all falls apart." Emma used their confrontation to slip away toward the buildings where she'd identified the prison quarters. Her recovered memories guided her through the maze of structures, and her years of surviving in hostile environments had taught her how to move unseen through chaos. She found the first group of Apache women in a converted barn, and their faces showing the hollow-eyed emptiness of people whose spirits had been systematically broken. But when they saw her, something flickered in their eyes, recognition, hope, and the first stirring of defiance. "Little Fox." One of them whispered, a woman about Emma's age with traditional tattoos covering her arms. "Is it really you?" "It's really me," Emma replied, working quickly to pick the locks on their shackles. "I'm here to take you home." But as she freed the women, Emma realized that Blackwood's operation was even more extensive than she'd imagined. The prison quarters held not just Apache women, but Mexican girls, white women who'd been captured during raids, and even some children who'd been taken from their families. "How many are there?" she asked the Apache woman as they moved through the compound. "Dozens. Maybe 60 in total. Blackwood has been collecting us for years, breaking our spirits to break our people's will to resist." The woman's voice was bitter, but growing stronger. "He believes that by controlling us, he can control our tribes." Emma's jaw tightened with rage. This wasn't just about silver or land. It was about the systematic destruction of Apache culture through the abuse of their women and children. But her father's teachings about controlling anger and using it as a weapon kept her focused on the mission. As they freed other prisoners, Emma caught sight of Blackwood and Morrison near the main house. The two men were no longer arguing, they were actively trying to kill each other. Their former partnership dissolved in mutual paranoia and betrayal. "That this is your fault," Blackwood was shouting as he fired at Morrison from behind an overturned table. "You were supposed to keep her contained." "She was contained until you got greedy." Morrison replied, his own shots splintering the wood near Blackwood's head. "You couldn't leave well enough alone." Emma realized that her psychological manipulation had worked even better than she'd hoped. The two men were so focused on destroying each other that they'd forgotten about the larger battle raging around them. But her moment of satisfaction was short-lived. As she led the rescued women toward the compound's exit, a gunshot echoed from the main house, followed by an ominous silence. One of her enemies was dead, but she didn't know which one, and the survivor would be even more dangerous. The answer came when Morrison emerged from the house, his face streaked with blood, and his eyes wild with desperate fury. Blackwood was nowhere to be seen, and Emma's enhanced people-reading skills immediately identified Morrison as a man who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. "Little Fox," he called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "You think you're so clever turning us against each other, but you made one mistake, you left me alive." Emma positioned herself between Morrison and the rescued women, her father's teachings about protective leadership, overriding her instinct for self-preservation. It's over, Morrison. Blackwood is dead, your crimes are exposed, and the women are free. Surrender now, and I'll make sure you get a fair trial. Morrison's laugh was harsh and broken. Fair trial, I'm a dead man either way. But if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. The confrontation that followed was swift and brutal. Morrison was a trained soldier, but Emma had advantages. He couldn't counter her ability to read his intentions, her knowledge of the compound's layout, and most importantly, the support of the women she'd freed. When Morrison lunged at her with a knife, Emma used her father's teachings about redirecting an opponent's energy against them. She caught his wrist, twisted it sharply, and sent him crashing into a wooden support beam. "You're finished, Morrison," she said, standing over him as he struggled to rise. "Your empire is burning, your partner is dead, and your crimes are documented. There's nowhere left to run." Morrison's only response was to reach for a hidden derringer, but Emma was faster. Her kick sent the weapon flying, and Morrison collapsed, his spirit finally broken. As the battle wound down around them, Emma stood in the courtyard of Blackwood's ranch, surrounded by the women she'd freed, and the warriors who'd helped her achieve justice. The compound was in flames. Its evil purpose finally ended. "Is it over?" asked Sophia, who had been among the rescued women. Emma looked out at the burning buildings, then at the faces of the women who'd been held captive for years. "This part is over. But now comes the harder work, healing, rebuilding, and making sure that something like this never happens again." 6 months later, Emma stood in the chambers of the territorial legislature in Prescott, Arizona, addressing a joint session of lawmakers, military officials, and tribal representatives. The auburn-haired young woman who commanded the room bore little resemblance to the frightened orphan who'd been taken from St. Mary's orphanage, but she carried within her the strength of both identities. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the chamber, "I stand before you today, not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a witness bearing testimony. I am here to tell you the truth about what has been done in your name, and to propose a path forward that serves justice and peace." Her testimony, backed by the documentary evidence recovered from Blackwood's ranch and corroborated by dozens of witnesses, sent shockwaves through the territory. The conspiracy, she revealed, went far beyond one man's greed. It implicated military officers, territorial officials, and businessmen in a systematic campaign designed to destroy Apache culture. But Emma's presentation wasn't just about exposing past crimes. It was about building a future where Apache people could maintain their heritage while participating in the broader American society. Her unique position as someone who'd lived successfully in both worlds gave her credibility that no one else could match. "The Apache people don't want to live in the past," she told the assembled officials. "We want to be part of the future, but we want to be partners, not prisoners. We want to contribute to the growth of this territory, not be obstacles to it." The negotiations that followed were complex and difficult, but Emma's combination of diplomatic skill and moral authority gradually won over even the most skeptical officials. When one legislator objected to granting Apache land rights, Emma calmly presented evidence of the silver deposits on those lands and proposed a partnership that would benefit both peoples. "You're asking us to trust people who've been at war with us for decades," the legislator protested. "I'm asking you to trust someone who's lived in both worlds and understands that war benefits no one," Emma replied. "I've seen what hatred and greed can accomplish. It creates places like Blackwood's ranch. I've also seen what cooperation and understanding can build. It creates communities where children can grow up safe, regardless of their heritage." By the end of the year, the Apache had secured recognition of their territorial rights protection from military harassment and assistance in establishing schools and medical facilities. But perhaps more importantly, Emma had become a symbol of hope for other survivors of trauma across the territory. One evening, as Emma sat by the fire in the Apache settlement that had grown around their original stronghold, Grandmother Willow approached her with a leather-wrapped bundle. "I've been saving this for you," the elderly woman said carefully, unwrapping what proved to be a journal bound in deerskin. "Your father's private writings. He left instructions that you should receive it when you were ready to understand its contents." Emma opened the journal with trembling hands, reading her father's careful script by firelight. The entries detailed his preparations for the inevitable conflict with white settlers, his strategies for protecting his people, and most remarkably, his prophetic understanding of his daughter's role in that future. "She will walk in two worlds." One entry read, "And from that walking, she will gain the wisdom to bridge them. The trauma that takes her from us will also prepare her to lead us into a new age. She will be broken and made whole, lost and found, and in her healing, our people will find their path forward." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she read her father's words. He knew. Somehow he knew what would happen. "Your father was a wise man," Grandmother Willow said gently. "He understood that sometimes the greatest leaders are forged in the fire of suffering. He also understood that you would need to become both Emma and Little Fox to fulfill your destiny." Emma closed the journal and looked out at the settlement around them, children playing in the evening light, women working together to prepare food, men sharing stories of their day's work. This was her home, her people, her responsibility. But it was also something new, a community that honored the past while embracing the future. "There's something else," Grandmother Willow said, producing a small silver key from her pocket. "Your father hid this with the journal. He said it would open something that belonged to you when you were ready to claim your full heritage." Emma examined the key, noting how it seemed designed to work with the intricate mechanisms of her fox pendant. When she inserted it into a hidden compartment in the pendant, the mechanism clicked open to reveal a small chamber containing a rolled piece of parchment. The parchment bore a map in her father's handwriting, marking the location of the sacred silver mine that had been the original cause of Blackwood's obsession. But more than that, it contained detailed instructions for using the mine's resources to fund the Apache's future schools, hospitals, and diplomatic missions that would ensure their people's prosperity. "He planned for everything," Emma whispered, understanding finally dawning. "The mine, the leadership training, even my capture and recovery, it was all part of his vision for our people's survival. Not planned, child. Foreseen. Your father had the gift of seeing possible futures, and he prepared for the one he believed would best serve our people." Grandmother Willow smiled. "He saw that you would need to be both Emma and Little Fox, and he left you the tools to succeed in both roles." Emma stood and walked to the edge of the settlement, looking out at the desert landscape that had shaped her people for centuries. The stars were coming out, painting the sky with the same patterns her mother had sung about in the lullabies she was finally beginning to remember. Sophia joined her at the overlook, her own healing journey nearly complete. "What happens now?" Emma touched her pendant, feeling its familiar warmth and the new weight of the key that had unlocked her full heritage. "Now we build the future my father envisioned. A future where Apache children can grow up knowing their heritage while also participating in the wider world. A future where being both Emma and Little Fox isn't a burden, but a strength." As the months passed, Emma threw herself into the work of building that future. The silver mine provided the resources needed to establish schools where Apache children could learn both traditional ways and modern skills. The diplomatic connections she'd made in Prescott led to partnerships with sympathetic businessmen and officials who saw the benefit of cooperation over conflict. But perhaps most importantly, Emma's story became a beacon of hope for other survivors of trauma throughout the territory. Women who'd been captured, abused, and broken by men like Blackwood found in her example proof that healing was possible, that strength could emerge from suffering, that identity could be reclaimed even after seemingly insurmountable loss. 1 year after the destruction of Blackwood's ranch, Emma stood once again at the grave of Father McKenna. The simple wooden cross had been replaced by a proper headstone paid for by the grateful Apache community and inscribed with words in both English and Apache. "I understand now," she said softly to the grave. "You knew who I was from the beginning. You and Samuel and all the others who helped protect me. You were part of Father's plan to ensure I would survive long enough to fulfill my destiny." The wind through the desert grass seemed to carry an answer, and Emma smiled. She pulled out a letter she'd written not to send, but to organize her thoughts and feelings. "My dear Father McKenna," she read aloud, "I want you to know that I found my way home. Not just to my people, but to myself. The memories you helped preserve, the identity you protected, the strength you nurtured, all of it served the purpose my father envisioned. I am both Emma and Little Fox now, and I am finally whole." She folded the letter carefully and placed it beneath a stone at the base of the headstone. Then she mounted her horse and rode back toward the Apache settlement, where a delegation of territorial officials was waiting to discuss the expansion of their partnership. As she rode across the desert landscape that had shaped her people for generations, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She'd been broken and made whole, lost and found, taken and returned. She'd walked in 2 worlds and found her place in both. Most importantly, she'd learned that memory was indeed the sacred fire that never truly dies. It only waits for the right wind to rekindle the flame. And Emma Sullivan, also known as Little Fox, daughter of Chief Running Bear Bridge between worlds, and keeper of the sacred fire, had become the wind that rekindled the flame of hope for all her people. The sun was setting as she reached the settlement, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Behind her, the past lay resolved but not forgotten. Ahead of her, the future stretched out like an endless horizon, full of possibility and promise. Emma touched her pendant one final time, feeling its familiar warmth against her chest. She was ready for whatever came next, because she knew who she was, where she came from, and where she was going. The sacred fire within her burned bright, and it would never be extinguished again.